Let's go live to Sydney now. The Shadow Home Affairs Minister, Kristina Keneally, joins me live. Thanks so much for your time. Cost of living. I mean, these figures yesterday just confirm what everyone is feeling. What is Labor going to do about easing the cost of living?
Well, Laura, you are so correct that, Australian families are feeling these rising costs of living, skyrocketing costs of living, while real wages are going backwards. And, people are struggling to make ends meet. And what we see from Mr. Morrison and his government is no plan for the future. They've got a plan to get them to the other side of the election, but they don't have a plan to grow the economy sustainably. And that's important because as families right across Australia know, now that they're facing skyrocketing costs of living, falling wages, real wages going backwards, and now the very real prospect of an interest rate hike, we need to have a better plan for a future. We need to have a plan that sees some of the real challenges families face. Childcare costs coming down, electricity costs coming down, investing in skills and training for Australians, growing jobs, backing the care economy and a pay rise for workers in that economy. Where is Mr. Morrison's plan? Where is his plan? Where is his vision for the future? What we heard from him this morning, lots of excuses, blaming other people, but no plan, no hope, no promise of a better future under Scott Morrison.
The cost of the things you just mentioned are going up at the moment. Childcare, Labor has a more comprehensive policy to capture more people, but this is just talking about subsidies. That doesn't mean the cost isn't going up. So either taxpayers or families pay for it. That's not sustainable, is it?
Laura, what we are seeing, and you're spot on, is that costs are going up and people are looking for help to meet these rising costs of living. And as I've just outlined, Labor's plan for good, secure jobs, for investing in childcare. And let me take you through the childcare just briefly.
What does good, secure jobs mean,
it's not just about the cost,
Keneally? Because that does sound like a motherhood statement. What does good, secure jobs mean?
Laura, can I please finish? You asked me a question. Please let me finish. When we're talking about childcare, it's not just about the cost, although that is fundamentally important, and our plan will see 96% of families better off. But it's also about removing the disincentive for people to get more hours at work. Right now, particularly for women, if you work a fourth or a fifth day, you actually go backwards. So this is not just about decreasing the cost, it's about providing a boost to the economy. Right now, we have 1.4 million Australians who are either unemployed or can't get enough hours at work to pay their bills. So the opportunity for women in particular to be able to work a fourth and fifth day, to take more hours at work, is a fundamentally important economic reform.
Yeah, certainly a lot of people will be tuning in at this point in the election to find out what both the major parties will do about their cost of living situation. Let's talk about border protection, which is in your policy remit. Labor for Refugees, this is a story in the Daily Telegraph today, last year said in a document, quote, after Labor wins the election and Labor's refugee policy have resulted in positive outcomes, Kristina Keneally would welcome an approach by L4R to end offshore processing. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know what they have said, but I can tell you what our policy is. And our policy is we support Operation Sovereign Borders, regional resettlement, offshore processing, and boat turnbacks were safe to do so. That has been our policy, it is our policy, and it will continue to be our policy. And make no mistake, if you attempt to come to Australia by boat, you will not make it. You will be turned back or you will be sent to Nauru.
So Labor for Refugees have their wires crossed, it would seem here.
I don't know what they've said. I haven't seen the document. But I am clear with you and I'm clear with them. And they know my position. They know it. You know it. The Australian people know it. And that is we support Operation Sovereign Borders.
They think
boat turnbacks were safe to do so. Regional resettlement and offshore processing. And Laura, let me repeat again. If you attempt to come to Australia by boat, you will not make it. You will be turned back or you will be sent to Nauru.
Okay, so Labor for Refugees thinks that you would end offshore processing. That's not true. Is that what you're saying this morning?
Yes.
Okay, what about temporary protection visas? Is that part of the suite of measures?
Laura, we are quite clear on our position on temporary protection visas, and I went through this the other day with Kieran. I'm happy to go through it with you again. And that is that temporary protection visas are not part of Operation Sovereign Borders. Nobody has gone on a temporary protection visas since Operation Sovereign Borders was introduced, because if people attempt to come by boat, they will not make it. They will be turned back or sent to Nauru. People who go to Nauru are not put on a temporary protection visa. They're not put on an Australian visa. So with respect to Ray Hadley the other day, he was wrong. So let me be clear, temporary protection visas are only for a cohort of people who were recognised as refugees by the Liberal government, who've been in Australia for more than 10 years. They work here, they pay taxes, they run businesses, they're part of the Australian community, and yet every 3 or 5 years, the government demands that they go through a bureaucratic process to prove that they are still in need of protection.
Okay.
Our policy is to end TPVs because it is a costly, unnecessary bureaucratic process for no good outcome. What is important for Operation Sovereign Borders is that we have boat turnbacks where safe to do so, where we have regional resettlement, and where people who come to Australia will be sent to Nauru or will be turned back. Offshore processing is a fundamentally important part of Operation Sovereign Borders. In fact, it was Labor that introduced it.
This is what Ray Hadley had to say. It's fair that we play you the clip.
Kristina Keneally took to me on social media after that interview saying I didn't understand what TPVs were. I'm afraid I lived through the last TPV episode. Now, he made the point in that interview that there have been no TPVs issued since 2013. Paul, there's a very good reason for that. No one's come. No one's come because Abbott, Morrison and Jim Molan put together Operation Sovereign Borders. It's got 3 prongs to it. You take one of the 3 out, you've got a mess.
So his point there, Kristina Keneally, is that no TPVs have been issued because no boats have arrived. The other point to be made here is these are delicate operations.
No boats have arrived because they are turned back or you are sent to Nauru.
That's
right. If you
right.
attempt to come to Australia by boat, you will not make it.
Well, there are circumstances if a boat cannot be turned back, if it's been sabotaged, if some of the occupants of the boat end up in the water and they need to be taken aboard an Operation Sovereign Borders vessel. The question is,
they will be
what
taken
happens?
to Nauru.
They will be taken directly to Nauru.
They will be taken to Nauru.
That is not something
They will be taken to Nauru.
is that something that has directly happened under this government? Usually they're taken ashore to processing and then taken. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a gap here.
Laura, there is no gap here. People do not go on temporary protection visas anymore because if they are intercepted, they are taken to Nauru. And as I explained to Kieran the other day, even if people are transferred to Australia from Nauru for medical treatment, they don't go on temporary protection visas. They're either here under ministerial permission with no visa, or they're on a bridging visa.
Why do you need to abolish them if they're not used? Would it be prudent just to keep them there as that extra level of protection?
Laura, nobody goes on temporary protection visas anymore because if you attempt to come by boat, you don't get a temporary protection visa, you get turned back or you get sent to Nauru. What happens now is that we have a cohort of people who've been living in Australia, recognised as refugees by a Liberal government, been in the country for more than a decade, working, paying taxes, and yet we put them through an unnecessary, costly bureaucratic process every 3 or 5 years to determine if they still merit refugee protection. The thing is, Laura, we've got a Department of Home Affairs that is clogged. It has a backlog of over 100,000 citizenship applications, a backlog of over 54,000 partner visa applications. Businesses tell me it takes more than a year sometimes 2, to get a skilled visa employee approved to come through the Department of Home Affairs. We've got a clogged, dysfunctional department. 300,000 bridging visas right now in Australia. That's up. That is, in fact, when we left office, there were only 100,000. It was a churn. 300,000 is a sign of a department in distress. And yet, for this very small cohort of people, we continue to ask them to go through another clogged bureaucratic process. It's costly to the taxpayer. It produces no good outcome for the community. and it should be ended.
The last time I had you on the program, you said that the Murugappan family would be going home to Biloela if Labor did win government. Is that still the case?
Yes.
So the threat of deportation would no longer hang over their heads and you would give them permanent citizenship?
We would allow them to go home to Biloela. The issue we have right now is the youngest daughter does not have a visa that allows her to travel. The government have given visas to the other three, but they haven't given one to the youngest daughter. As to how their visa status would get resolved, that is something I would consider in government. We would allow them to go home to Biloela, and we would sort out the best visa for them to go on in order for them to be able to stay.
What do you think that best visa would be?
Well, I'm not going to start canvassing that now, but I'm going to be clear to the Australian people that the Biloela family, the Murugappan family, should be able to go home to Biloela. The father, Nadez, is a meat worker and a forklift driver, both skills that we need in Australia, particularly in regional Australia. This sad, sorry saga has been allowed to be created by the government. $50 million they have spent already of taxpayer money. The town of Biloela wants this family home and they want them to stay. This could happen today with a stroke of a pen by the Immigration Minister, Alex Hawke. So let me be clear. If Alex Hawke won't take action, an Albanese Labor government will. It is time to bring this expensive, sorry saga to an end, to let this family go back to Biloela, the town in Queensland that loves them and wants them back, and it's time to resolve their future here in Australia.
You would also have the power to give them a permanent citizenship or a permanent visa. Would you do that?
Laura, as I said, as to what visa class they go on, I'm not going to start canvassing here, but I am being abundantly clear with you that we will let them go home to Biloela and we will resolve their future to be here in Australia.
Okay, one final question. Dalee has agreed to a debate. Would you agree to a debate with her?
I would love to have a debate with all the candidates running in Fowler, Laura.
So not just Dalee, all of the candidates would have to be involved in order for you to agree to a debate on Sky News?
Here's the thing. The election that we've got coming up in every electorate is a choice between a tired Liberal government that has left Australian families behind as prices are skyrocketing, as we face the prospect now of an interest rate rise, and in particularly in Southwest Sydney, where the unemployment rate is double that of the national figure. It's at 9%, where we have families who are on average weekly incomes that are much lower than the national average, but yet they're paying Sydney housing prices, where the cost of everything is going up and people are struggling to make ends meet. And there's a Liberal candidate in the field. She represents Scott Morrison in the Liberal Party. She should be putting forward her views.
Okay.
As to what she would do for the people of Sydney.
Is that yes or no to a debate?
As I said, I would love to debate all the candidates running in Fowler.
Okay, Kristina Keneally, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Laura.